Continuation of Chapter 4. The Church's Social Doctrine, the Encyclical Rerum Novarum. The popes have taught what they require in several very well-developed encyclicals. For example, Rerum Novarum by Leo XIII. There are other encyclicals on the social questions and on the benefits that accrue from the guilds. One should not hesitate to refer to them in order to have a point of comparison with the present situation and to be able to understand it. It is interesting that the Swiss have kept this spirit of corporatism. In 1927 or 1928, they concluded an accord between owners and workers declaring strikes illegal. This is why there are no strikes in Switzerland. At the same time, they established boards or councils, so that as soon as a problem arises, bosses, workers, and representatives of the economic boards of the country meet to study and resolve the disagreement, see if it is possible to increase wages, and finally conclude an agreement. But work goes on, because halting work endangers the enterprise. For if a strike lasts a certain length of time, the competitors profit from the situation to lure away the clients of a company paralyzed by a strike. It is absurd that workers, by acting in such a manner, kill the very thing by which they live. From this point of view, Switzerland is really a model. It is the only country in Europe where the strike is illegal. When this is related in other countries, people answer with incredulity. They cannot believe there is a country left where strikes are prohibited. Yet Switzerland has one of the highest standards of living. This is normal. Christian social order. In the December 1980 issue of Itinéraire, there was an article about a recently published work on Chile, showing the progress the country had made since the expulsion of communism. It is the country that has made the most economic progress in the world in the last 5 years. The same thing happened in Portugal under Salazar, and in Spain under Franco. The living standard improved because there was order, because everyone was working, and the spirit of justice returned under Christian laws. When the Christian spirit takes hold in a society, it brings with it the spirit of justice, of mutual aid, understanding, and peace. The money becomes stable, and people live in peace and harmony. This is so obvious that the enemies of social justice, as the Church understands the term, are furious and seek to destroy the countries that give an example contrary to their own designs. Another example is Cuba. There, people are very unhappy too, but not for the same reasons. It is because they lack everything and go hungry. Disorder reigns, and despite all this, in the Western countries, communism is always presented as the workers' party, the party of progress that defends the unfortunate. Such a representation is incredible, and the offshoot of disinformation and willful blindness. But they do not care, for above all they desire to reject and suppress the Christian spirit. The teaching of the popes on the subject is particularly enlightening. Finally, Leo XIII proposes another remedy, the society founded under the patronage of Saint Vincent de Paul. Quote, "We cannot omit mentioning that exemplary society named after its founder, Saint Vincent, which has deserved so well of the people of the lower order. Its acts and its aims are well known." End quote. Footnote: Here we can cite as an example the Institute of the Brothers of St. Vincent de Paul. They were founded in 1845 by 3 laymen, the first of whom later received holy orders, Messieurs Laprévost, Mionnet, and Maurice Maignan. Living the common life, these religious, who had been well instructed in the social teaching of the Church and the ongoing fight against liberalism, directed halfway houses, orphanages, groups, credit unions, protective associations for apprentices, and charitable foundations. It was a magnificent work for the regeneration of Christian dignity and the improvement of the condition of working men. End footnote. This is what Pope Leo XIII says about it. Quote, "Its whole object is to give relief to the poor and miserable. This it does with singular prudence and modesty, and the less it wishes to be seen, the better it is fitted for the exercise of Christian charity and for the relief of the suffering." End quote. It is true that now a complex system of insurance exists, which has, to a certain extent, diminished the misfortunes. But there are still so many poor, especially in the big cities, many of whom are unknown, but whose poverty exists nonetheless. For these cases, the Institute of the Brothers of St. Vincent de Paul would have done much good, for it helped to bring not only material relief, but also spiritual help by the many organizations it sustained to help the poor in their different needs. There will always be poor people. Our Lord said, quote, "For the poor you have always with you." Matthew 26:11. Protect the youth from the sects. The Pope then reminds them of the dangers that threaten the youth in the instruction that is given. Quote, "In order more easily to attain what we wish, to your fidelity and watchfulness we commend in a special manner the young, as being the hope of human society. Devote the greatest part of your care to their instruction, and do not think that any precaution can be great enough in keeping them from masters and schools whence the pestilent breath of the sects is to be feared." End quote. Thus, one infers the Pope is designating the public schools. It is a salutary warning that remains ever opportune, because one often hears parents say that they still prefer to put their son or daughter in a public school rather than in a Catholic school. Can this be done? It is true that in certain instances the secular schools are not very hostile to religion or the Catholic faith. Even so, it must not be forgotten that in these secular schools the children are brought up in an atmosphere where God and religion are omitted, and this is very grave. The simple exposure to this atmosphere, which is fundamentally atheistic, is a grave risk for the children. In the long run, they are likely to become completely indifferent as to religion. They may acquire the profound impression that religion is not necessary. Who needs it? What good is it? One goes to school, gets a degree, practices a profession or trade. Religion serves no useful purpose. The ambiance of the secular school penetrates the minds and hearts of the children. We must found, therefore, integrally Catholic schools. Prayer for the combatants in the fight against the sects. Then, quite naturally, as he should, the Pope turns towards prayer, and he finishes there. Quote, "We well know, however, that our united labors will by no means suffice to pluck up these pernicious seeds from the Lord's field, unless the heavenly Master of the vineyard shall mercifully help us in our endeavors. We must, therefore, with great and anxious care, implore of him the help which the greatness of the danger and of the need requires. So vehement an attack demands an equal defense, namely, that all good men should form the widest possible association of action and of prayer." End quote. The Pope enjoins us to have recourse to prayer, for there lies our true help. Quote, "We beseech them, therefore, with united hearts, to stand together and unmoved against the advancing force of the sects, and in mourning and supplication to stretch out their hands to God, praying that the Christian name may flourish and prosper, that the Church may enjoy its needed liberty, that those who have gone astray may return to a right mind, that error at length may give place to truth and vice to virtue. Let us take as our helper and intercessor the Virgin Mary, Mother of God. Let us beseech Michael, the prince of the heavenly angels, who drove out the infernal foe, and Joseph, the spouse of the Most Holy Virgin, and heavenly patron of the Catholic Church, and the great apostles Peter and Paul, the fathers and victorious champions of the Christian faith. By their patronage, and by perseverance in united prayer, we hope that God will mercifully and opportunely succor the human race, which is encompassed by so many dangers." End quote. And finally, in concluding the important encyclical which summarizes all that his predecessors had said on the subject of the Masonic sects, the Pope gives his apostolic benediction.